this year is the 50th anniversary of the Lamborghini Countach, and when we first started, and I should say I first started, I've always been a huge fan of the Countach. It's part of our DNA. Growing up, and I've talked about this many times when we've shown videos, my father had a service facility, and he was authorized through Joe Nastasi, who was the distributor for Lamborghini in the 80s, to be authorized service and sales. So he was, at one time, he had 21 Countaches at his place for different service issues, and he had sort of, I guess, you know, my father's like an OCD artisan. So he became this expert on Countaches and understanding what made them tick and making them, I would say, reliable, at least for his clients. And I remember growing up, many times, you know, he would, you know, whether he was buying a Countach, selling a Countach, or servicing it, if he was test driving it, I have to say that I probably had been in hundreds of Countaches growing up, and some of the best stories, I would say, are going to school in Countaches. Now, the presence of a Countach in that period was far greater than anything today. I mean, let's face it, you know, everything was a square station wagon, or, you know, you look at what a Caprice Classic looked like, or, you know, these square American cars, and then you had this spaceship-looking car on the road. A Countach would stop traffic. There was a time when my father, I'll never forget this, in a black with red Countach dropped me off to school, and all the kids from the school ran out around the car, and there was like this commotion. There was probably 100 kids that ran to the car, and the principal ran out, Mrs. Strosky, I'll never forget her name, and she started yelling at all the kids, "Everybody, you gotta stop." And the kids were not listening. They were surrounding the Countach. And she basically, I don't know what you would call it, but put all the kids into detention in the cafeteria for running out into the street around this Countach. Now, what she didn't realize was I was the one in the Countach, and she put me in this detention and actually told, you know, hey, you guys are all in trouble. You didn't listen to me. You ran out towards the car. It's not safe. And meanwhile, I'm this meek little kid trying to say, excuse me, I was in the car. But I have so many great stories around Countaches, you know, and later as I grew up, I was, you know, started to wash cars on the weekends for my dad. So I was washing Countaches. I was organizing the books. I was going through paperwork. And then eventually, as I grew older, he gave me tasks. It could have been, you know, changing a couple screws or changing a rubber or doing different things. So I didn't realize it, but my knowledge for the cars and my excitement for the cars, I would say in many ways, you know, is like overwhelming. Today, when a Countach arrives, I get excited. You know, I don't think my exposure to the Countach ever jaded me in any reason. Driving a Countach still puts a smile on my face and brings me back to that moment as a young child. You know, I'll never forget when my dad brought home the first anniversary, and it was like such a big deal to me because I remember I had never seen an anniversary car before, and I remember the smells and the sounds. So I'm a huge advocate. Since we've opened up, we've become, I would say, you know, we've sold over 25 Countach examples, and we've become, I would say, probably one of the premier dealers in the world for Countach cars, and that's it feels like an honor. It's, you know, it's overwhelming. It's surreal to have this opportunity to share my passion with so many collectors and so many people, and doing something that I truly love and something that I believe in. And I've always believed in the Countach, and I believe that we're at an exciting moment now because I see a lot of new collectors coming into this world. One of those new collectors, and hopefully I'm gonna have to show him this video first before we put it out there, but one of the collectors has probably one of the most significant car collections in the world. And his collection has included cars such as a 250 GTO, a McLaren F1, and he had never had a Countach. He had never driven a Countach. He had never been around a Countach. And I think that my passion for the cars and my belief in the cars as the future, I mean, I look at the cars, the chassis, the design as modern art and the next generation version of art. And if you think about how rare the Countach is in terms of its production from 1975 until 1990, I mean, we're talking about, there were years where they produced 50 cars, 100 cars. We're not talking about a lot of cars that are left in the world today. And you compare the pricing of this iconic car that shocked the world, a car that was the most written about car in magazines, movies, TV, etc. They're pretty cheap relative to their impact and their rarity. So obviously I expressed that passion to him. He's an astute, discerning collector, and he told me, you know what, John, find me a great Countach. This is now 7 months ago, we find a great car I had sold a few years ago as a 2,100 mile. And this car was just a really nice example, but unfortunately, it hadn't been really well serviced. And I would say that is the biggest problem with Countaches. People are always complaining, oh, it was a terrible driving experience. Oh, I didn't enjoy it. And I would say that's 99% of the time because suspension bushings are gone, the cars are leaking, the cars aren't running right, all the spark plugs are fouled, they've got, catalysts on them that are plugging up the exhaust, or old catalysts that the engine can't even breathe, old tires, so the cars, I could go on and on and on with all the things. But really, when you're doing a Countach service, I would say I always go through spark plugs, spark plug wires, distributors, you check the brain boxes, valve cover gaskets, you check the head gaskets, but it's pretty rare that they're bad. And then you go through all the suspension bushings. They go bad, and there's a ton of rubber bushings in the suspension. It can be quite expensive, probably $5,000 to $8,000 to do it, but it's worth it. And then I always put on, if it was a US car, I put some sort of a sport exhaust. The ANSA sport exhaust, which was optional for the Countach, really opens it up. It makes it rev quicker. It feels like a lighter car. And then I put the correct tires. So for a 5000S or earlier, Pirelli used to produce the P7 or the P7R, which was a 205 front tire, so it was a smaller tire. Luckily, Pirelli now reproduces a period correct original tire, which is the Pirelli P7. So I put fresh tires, and then you do all the fluids correctly. Flush the brake fluid, and really sort of look at all the details and correct anything the car needs. So this car needed not everything, but mechanically it needed a going through. And he was sort of in a rush to get the car, and I said, let's just trust me. You're going to end up spending, $20,000 to $30,000, but trust me, let me make your first Countach experience magical. We went through it, and it was probably about a month and a half of work, and he was excited to get the car, but I said, listen, let me drive it, let me test it. So I would take it out when we'd do something, I'd try it, and I'd say, okay, almost there, let's do this. Okay, almost there, let's do this. And we went through it. The original radio we got working. We made sure the AC, everything was working. And what's funny is a Countach AC can actually be very good. It can blow very cold AC, almost 42 to 44 degrees. Most of the time, there's no Freon. It's not working. The evaporator's known for going. The dryer's known for going. So we changed all that in this car. And I'll never forget the last week that we're preparing the car. I took it out one day with the suspension that was just like snug to the ground, with the fresh tires, with the exhaust, and I couldn't get a smile off of my face. I mean, it drove exactly how they did when they were new. It did everything right. I then called him and I said, okay, it's ready for pickup. And during the process, I told him, I said, if you're not happy at any point, I want the car back. It's an incredible example, but I'm 99% sure you're going to fall in love with a Countach. And his skepticism was, rumors that he had heard they weren't great to drive, or rumors that he wouldn't like it. I said, well, so he gets the car, and I sort of knew when the car would arrive to him, and I didn't hear anything, and I was actually a little concerned. Almost a week goes by, and I'm like, okay, either he hates it or he loves it. And he's a gentleman collector, so he's not the type of guy that's going to call me and yell or anything like that. So I'm like, oh my God. And sincerely, I just wanted him to like the car. It wasn't even about, buying the car back or making money with him. It was my excitement. I get a call, and he was blown away. And this is a guy that's driven everything. He's owned everything, and he couldn't understand how they're so cheap, and he couldn't understand, he said, man, it handles well. I pushed it to 140, 120 miles per hour, and, it just, sticks to the ground. He goes, it's a man's car. I love it. He goes, I don't know why they have such a bad reputation. And you could hear the excitement in his voice. And I will have to say that of all the transactions I've ever had, of all the things that I've ever done in my life and my professional career, hearing that from him was probably the most fulfilling thing that I've heard ever from any client, because of his level of understanding of cars, his knowledge for cars, his discernment. And to hear a guy at his level say that to me, it was worth more than anything in the world, and probably made my year. I haven't told too many people that story, but it was probably one of the most exciting parts of my career to hear that, hear his excitement for the cars. And it's funny, it's something that happens now regularly. I hate selling a Countach without it going through a service or without doing certain things. And I think it's something that it's important for the iconic nature of the car. It's like we have to save these cars. I feel like in a way sometimes I'm doing God's work. And I'm sort of kidding. Someone actually said that in a comment once. But no, you feel like you're doing something good, and you feel like you're doing something more than just selling cars. And I feel like I'm sharing part of my life and my passion. And I'm excited to give you guys some more great Countach content. This is an exciting year. It's 50th anniversary. Hopefully, if Pebble Beach is, happening this year, we'll be doing a Countach rally. So we'll have a ton of great more Countach content. So thank you guys again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing my passion for the Countach. I know we have a lot of fans out there, so don't forget to subscribe and like. We have a ton more content coming.